Today's AskReddit post. What's the cringiest thing you've seen a bride and groom do for their wedding? Oh boy, this is gonna be a good one. Let's get started. At the reception line, after the church wedding ceremony, the bride had a large bottle of her favorite perfume and sprayed each guest with it, female and male, whether they wanted it or not, as they entered the banquet hall. Some guests complained that the smell of perfume was so strong that they lost their appetite and couldn't partake of the banquet. Why would she do this? Communal headaches. The groom gave a speech thanking everyone for coming that devolved in the space of about 2 minutes into a straight up roast of his new brother-in-law. But they were friends, and the brother-in-law seemed to take it in good humor. But there's only so much implication of "I'm for sure going to be ducking your sister tonight" that you can take before it becomes really cringy. It didn't help that I barely knew anyone there because I was a +1. And B, I was on the table with the elderly relatives from that side of the family, who were less than amused. I don't trust you, buddy. Trust me, buddy. I'm ducking your daughter. I've worked over 200 weddings at the same venue. Many couples wanted fireworks and we had a company that could always do a show. The couple always, without fail, would pick Firework by Katy Perry to play during the show. This makes me feel sick. That might be from the perfume that the bride sprayed on everyone during the receiving line. My cousin and his wife are super religious and maybe the two most awkward people I've ever met. They did one of those fake out first dances where it starts with a slow song then transitions to a dance number with an upbeat song. Not only is that naturally cringeworthy, the upbeat song was 5 minutes long and they just kept repeating the same moves over and over for what felt like eternity. There was no alcohol allowed at the wedding, so there was nothing to dull the pain. A wedding without alcohol. Lord save us. I went to one of those. Everybody packed it in their purses or kept it in the car, and all the cool people hung out in the parking lot. Bride takes 3 hours to appear. After the ceremony, she and her spouse go up in an air balloon. The marriage did not last a year. Well, aside from the 2 hours late part, that could be cool. So one of the 3 hours counts as the normal lateness quota? The groom sang his vows. I honestly had to stare at the floor and slow breath to not laugh and get through it. My cousin did this. He played the guitar while singing his vows. He doesn't know how to play the guitar or sing. I went to a wedding once where they did a potluck. I guess it okay depending on the type of wedding, but the reception was at a fairly nice venue. The wedding couple was like an hour and a half late, and their best man didn't have a speech ready, so it went on for a very painful 15-25 minutes. Also stating in there that they're going to have great intercourse now that they're married. This was a devout Christian wedding with many of the friends, including me, were from church. By the time me at like table 15 got to eat, I was lucky if I got something that was kept warm in a crock pot, but everything else was room temperature. We were able to go home between the ceremony and the reception, but I bet most food had been sitting in people's cars since that morning. Oh. Also, the church that she moved to did the whole no kissing before marriage thing and started making out with her new husband on the altar to the point where the pastor had to say okay, that's enough. The whole thing was weird. Flew away in a helicopter at the end, but there were only appetizers for food. Wrong priorities. To be honest, I've been to quite a few weddings where we stopped for fries on the way home because of small quantities or reasons not to eat the main course, such as elegance over flavor. Somehow a lot of people seem to think that fish is elegant for weddings, but there's a lot of people who dislike fish or, like my boyfriend, are allergic to it. It happened at my wedding and I still look back and shake my head. 1. The pastor who we pushed to marry us found out that we had intercourse before marriage. He made sure to point that out during the ceremony. 2. When saying the vows I wrote, I got so damn emotional it all sounded like gibberish, and when I turned to get the ring from my best man, he was bawling his eyes out and couldn't find it. I can't imagine how PPL and the audience felt. Once the booze and dancing started, I'm sure all was fine. Dress up as Belle and the prince from Beauty and the Beast. The wedding was also held at a Renaissance fair during Pirate Weekend. The marriage lasted 6 months, but at least I got to dress up as a pirate and go home with a bridesmaid dressed as a fairy. INB 4 jokes about plundering her booty. My wife and I don't dance, so we hadn't danced together before our wedding dance. Loved it, but it was cringeworthy. We did 10 dance lessons which helped, but it was still cringe. I know a guy who recently made his lackeys, sorry friends, compete to be his best man. Most pretentious thing I have ever seen. Watching them grovel was so upsetting to me. I really hope when he told them all what he was doing he signed off by saying may the best man win. Oh nice. We were Mario and Peach for our wedding. Please tell me there was a groomsman dressed as Bowser. Went to a wedding in the United States. This was both the bride and groom's 4th marriages to each other. They got married 4 times and divorced 3. They picked a dirty motorcycle bar. Not my wedding. Theirs. Okay. But were openly giving young children alcohol and laughing at them being drunk. I asked my friend if I could leave when the bride pulled a knife out of her breasts and tried to stab the groom for having intercourse with a woman while they were divorced. I'm not sure if this is common in New Jersey. Other weddings I attended while in the USA were not like that. I'm not sure if this is common in New Jersey. I would say if it's common anywhere it's probably in New Jersey. Not wedding but engagement ceremony. They reenacted a scene from an old romantic film about 2 lovers in 1800s in front of like 300 people. Sorry, engagement ceremony? What's that? A way to spend money you don't realize you need and to invite others to spend money on gifts to replenish your out-of-pocket costs for hosting the event in the first place. I went to a potluck wedding. The attendees kept all the food in their hot cars while at church. Then when we moved to the event hall they brought it all in to be served. Potato and macaroni salad after being in a hot car for an hour. Delish. Those were the high-end dishes. Some attendees brought 2 liters of soda or bags of chips. At this same wedding they also had a dollar dance. Everyone lines up and pays for the chance to dance with the bride. They pin dollars onto her dress. They ran out of pins so she started stuffing dollar bills into her bra. Also had a dollar dance. This by itself is cringeworthy. I've only been to one wedding where they did this and it was awful watching all these drunk, leering old men groping the bride to pin the dollar on her dress and dance with her for like 30 seconds. The woman who invited me to go as her guest didn't seem to think anything of it and wondered why I wasn't lining up for my turn to grab the bride's tits or ass. Really made me wonder if they were a bunch of inbred hillbilly duckers. Plus watching the groom grinning as the bride was basically poured at by all his and her uncles and cousins. Black. Well, the groom, my uncle, didn't do it, but my dad wrote help me on the bottom of his shoes in big blocky letters so when he went up and kneeled at one point the immediate crowd had a good laugh. Edit. My dad wrote the letters on my uncle's shoes, not his own. For a second I thought you married your uncle. When I was at a wedding of my parents' friends, the groom tried to throw a decently sized piece of cake at the bride who moved out of the way. The cake ended up hitting my 76-year-old grandma. We all had a good laugh, but we were all cringing at the same time at the missed cake attempt. I was raised a Jehovah's Witness. It's a cult. Dating is only allowed to find a marriage partner and was very monitored to ensure no premarital touching occurred. Worst wedding was a small ceremony. It was literally her family, his family and my family in her grandma's living room. What made it the worst was the XXX kiss at the end. The groom wanted the bride inside his mouth hardcore. There was tongue in and out everywhere, saliva and hot breathing, complete with first date excited groping. Nobody knew where to look for 5 minutes. JWs have the worst weddings and funerals. Honestly, I dread attending them. My husband left the cult about 10 years before I met him but he still has lots of JW family, of course. Surprisingly, they haven't cut him off, probably because some of them rely on him financially. Sorry to blab on. It's a major thorn in my life. They made their vows political statements. I mean, it's cool that you're passionate about your political beliefs and standings, but to put them in your vows? I went to several weddings while I lived in Korea, and in each of them many references to the unification of North and South Korea were made. I feel like that is slightly different from mentioning alliance to a specific political party of your country, which I assumed the OP meant, though I don't know. The whole garter thing disturbs me. Yes, such a weird thing to do. Here, let me throw my wife's underwear into a crowd of my family and friends. During the wedding of some friends of my wife, the groom stopped the party to put a corny video with their photos since the first time they met until then. It doesn't sound that bad, but honestly it was the most ridiculous video with a totally out of place song, made worse by the fact that the bride was laughing mockingly and taking tequila shots with her friends. Her reaction makes me sad. Poor guy. Well, he's 10 years older and wanted a trophy wife. Nowadays he loves to put her bikini pics from their vacations on his FB. At the beginning of the reception, we all had to stand up and sing the national anthem. To be clear, this was in another country I'd never been to a wedding in before. So I thought, okay, maybe this is just a tradition I've never heard of before here. Then I told this to other people, and they were all like, no, that's just really weird. Also, at that wedding the father of the groom ended his speech with what I'm sure he thought was an amazing joke on how it's easier to build a bridge to Hawaii than to understand what a woman is thinking. It would have been awkward enough had the man not also been standing between his ex and current wife as he was delivering it. Thank you for this. I've been dying for the seasonal AskReddit wedding content, and this year is gonna be a drought. Do you know our wedding shaming? My mom and Mill insisted on doing a stage, a bit of theater often to mock the bride and groom by showing embarrassing pictures from their childhood. Cringe-worthy all by itself. But we explicitly asked them not to and they went against our wishes. So when they performed their stage everyone was annoyed and embarrassed. When we finally made it through that ordeal we wanted THD party to resume. But my Mill did another stage and we were about ready to kill her. Ah yes, the stage. The most feared part of any wedding or gathering. Very rarely is it actually funny or entertaining. Most of the time just so goddamn annoying. I live in Britain and as a child there was a show on CBBC, Children's BBC, just like this. The show was called Marrying Mum and Dad. Oh lord, I hate that show. It's about these kids who get to arrange their parents' wedding. They choose the theme, the entertainment, and the cake. Naturally, the kids were always making absolutely horrible occasions. Because what did you expect? They would choose a ridiculous theme for the wedding. Australia, medieval, space, clowns, and have everyone arrive dresses appropriately. Then they make the couple do some activity or another. It ranges from bungee jumping to VR. For entertainment. Then they have the wedding and eat the cake. The worst part is that the parents have no clue what's happening. They don't know anything until the day, and the children will go out of their way to make them uncomfortable, making them eat bugs for entertainment. Everyone just has to go along with it, and you can tell all the guests are really awkward. And then at the end the couple have to say just how good their Australia themed wedding where they ate bugs was. Australian medieval space clown themed wedding. Wife and I walked out of the wedding to the Imperial March. It might be cringe but I loved it and would do it again. It might be cringe. No, your Star Wars themed wedding was so cool I read about it in Vogue. Force their wedding party to dance into the reception. Unless they are all people with that type of personality it's very awkward to witness because they're just so clearly uncomfortable. Well, they copied the majority of my and my husband's wedding ceremony. Same entrance music. It was an extremely specific pie of music cue to a very specific part of the song. Same vows, we wrote our own. And their best man's speech was almost a carbon copy of our best man's speech. They got married a year after we did. And I guess they couldn't think of anything else for their own wedding. Oh, and at that same wedding, a young religious couple regaled us with how awesome intercourse is and how they do it all the time while we were waiting to be dismissed. It was neat. This is my dad's story. He went to his friend's daughter's wedding reception. Before coming in, the bride and groom had this whole scene of them looking for each other. The guests watched it on a giant screen inside. Groom kneels before bride and tries to remove her garter with his teeth. Like, WTF. That's super common in the US, at least in my area. Definitely super common for us. It wasn't cringy for me, because my girlfriend made the cake, but the bride hates sweets and cheesy traditions. So when the cake came out, she grabbed a baseball bat and smashed it to pieces. Two of the bridesmaids had made a pinata cake that looked absolutely real, so everyone gasped when she grabbed the bat, but all the kids immediately flooded the floor when the candy spilled out everywhere. That's not cringe. That's awesome. I was at a friend's wedding where the pastor's sermon at the wedding was all about family dysfunction and divorce and how broken the institution of marriage is. He wrapped it up with a perfunctory bit about how that's why we need God in marriage, so that it isn't dysfunctional, but it was cringy all the way through. My wife and I were sitting there horrified. The bride and groom didn't seem to notice. They were smiling happily, like talking about divorce in a wedding ceremony was the most natural thing in the world. The bride and groom are still happily married though. I think they just wanted a reminder on the day that things didn't have to turn out like her parents or grandparents. For me, I went to this wedding where the bride and groom were super religious. During the reception, they washed each other's feet in the middle of the dance floor. This was to signify service to each other, or something like that, because of how Jesus washed the apostles' feet at the Last Supper. I think that's actually super cool. Very dedicated. I agree. Of all the Christian things to do and say, washing each other's feet is actually rather meaningful and actually represents the sentiment of Jesus, you know, the namesake of the religion. Unlike all that judgy bull poop of calling out premarital intercourse, or pretending to be morally superior to all other religions, and the whole woman is subservient to man sort of stuff you usually see in Christian weddings. For some reason, after the bride and groom kissed at a wedding I was at, the groom, a big douche to begin with, took a pair of hillbilly teeth out of his mouth and screamed, "I did it again, boys." I felt so sorry for the bride. IDK what she ever saw in the guy. They are now divorced. I don't get it. Yuck. They mouth kissed. It was like they'd never even heard of cooties. I got my cootie shot within the prescribed 24-hour window. Still though, I was weary of its effectiveness. Invite all their Facebook friends and expect 700 people and like less than 100 show up. I had to exil 3 or 4 hours late for her wedding because she couldn't find a suitable bra. Even 12-year-old me was even like, why does she even need one? The actual marriage didn't last long either. She was my brother's wartime pen pal and they actually met in person the week before the wedding when he came home from the desert. Instead of throwing rice, or confetti, or sprinkles, or anything like that, the bride and groom asked their friends to save all their empty jewel pods and throw those as they walked down the aisle. The friends obliged. Please chuck garbage at us as we leave the church, sure sets a tone for the marriage. Oh, I have two. 1. The bride decided to sing as she walked down the aisle. She was not a particularly talented singer, and she was singing over a Carrie Underwood song so we could all hear the original vocal track. She finished walking about halfway through the song and then stood there and sang the rest of the song at the groom, and all we could do was sit there and watch. 2. Different wedding. They began the wedding with the groom playing an out of tune guitar and singing to the bride. They were sitting on chairs in front of everyone, legit 400 people, and the bride was clearly uncomfortable, which made everyone else uncomfortable. That wedding also included a foot washing ceremony, and when the bride put her shoes back on she tripped on her dress and fell flat on her face. They hadn't done the vows yet and the ceremony stopped for 20 minutes to deal with the nosebleed she gave herself. At the reception, the groom took his shirt and pants off as a striptease while removing the bride's leg garter. He remained topless for the remainder of the wedding. The bride was doing the worm on the dance floor. They sound like fun. IDK if this counts, but the bride went to our Amith asshole and asked if she is tay for wanting to place PPL at her wedding depending on their Harry Potter house. Basically dividing couples etc. I remember that one. I was horrified. Okay, so I went as a date with my friend K for his best friend's wedding. It was at a Holiday Inn in South Jersey. The maid of honor was dating the bride's brother. So before the wedding B&G got wasted with everyone. Wedding goes down and B&G leave to go get it on. Mo and my date ended up hooking up and the bride's brother and him got into a fist fight and the lobby cops called. Oh, where was B&G doing shrooms with the rest of the wedding party. It was the trashiest wedding I've ever witnessed. Also B&G got divorced a year later. My date and Mo ended up getting married. I lost contact with both but they got divorced and she was telling everyone he was abusive. Fun times. Not the groom and bride's fault, but the pastor marrying them. Talked about his marriage and his kids for 20 minutes. He was obviously going for something of showing what marriage will be like, but he full up was talking about how his daughter, Kelsey, learned to walk this way, and his other daughter's first words were this and that he and his wife make love throughout the house because that's what you do in love, etc. Bride and groom had to stand there holding hands for 20 minutes right in front of him as the other 150 of us had to listen about his intercourse life and his kids. I corrected the bride's father after his speech. I no longer drink. Cringe and anti-cringe. Cringe, during his multi-million-pound hugely complicated wedding, broadcast worldwide, Prince Charles said to Diana, with all thy worldly goods I thee wed. Anti-cringe, a 5-year-old girl innocently asked, does this mean they have to do the marriage again? I went to the wedding of a high school friend and it was very traditionally Baptist. It was only surprising because my friend had not been extremely religious prior to this point. Anyway, they're saying their vows and he says he'll commit to protecting and loving her if she commits to respecting and serving him, and then she says the reverse to him. Then they walked out to Only Time by Enya. When I was 11 my cousin got married for the 3rd time. I never really liked her because A, she was 37 when I was 11. We didn't have a lot in common and B, she was pretty full of herself. The wedding itself was fine. Pretty boring but fine. Then we get to the reception. We were told we had to sit down as soon as we got there. Some people found it weird but I've only been to one other wedding before this. Her other marriages were when I was little. No kids were allowed at her weddings, so I didn't think anything of it. The bride and groom then make a huge dramatic entrance and everyone awkwardly clapped for them as they strutted around the room with actual crowns on their heads. The bride then gets the microphone and hands it to her mom and asks her to say something she loves about the bride. She then tells her mom to pass it on and says she wants everyone in the room to say one thing they absolutely love about the bride. Not the bride and groom. Not their relationship. Just the bride herself. It was super awkward. Bro, you actually watched the whole video. I'd give you a high five if I was a human. Make sure to click the like button and subscribe for more great content. See you next time.